Now settle in. Let the blanket find your shoulders. Let your feet go still. There is nothing out there in the dark that needs your attention tonight. Nothing that cannot wait. I want to tell you about a place called Shatter-Ridge. Most maps don't name it. The ones that do place it a full county east of where it truly sits, up in the laurel-tangled knuckles of the southern Appalachians, where the fog comes in off the ridgeline before the birds have bothered to wake, where the hemlock trees drip a cold mineral damp, leaving a smell like wet stone and iron, and something the soil keeps beneath its dark tongue and only releases after long rain. Clara Voss came back to Shatter-Ridge in October. She had not been back in 11 years. A person can do that, love a place and still stay away from it, the way you might love a song that makes you ache too deep to hear when you're already low. Clara was 34 now and steady, and she had driven 6 hours with a legal folder containing the last will and testament of her grandfather, Elias Voss, who had passed in September. Quietly, the hospice nurse said, like a candle that had finished its business. She pulled up the gravel lane as dusk gathered at the tree line, violet and gray, pressing close against the cabin windows. The cabin sat at the foot of the ridge, black chinked logs, a tin roof greened by moss, 2 front windows like half-shut eyes. The yard held Elias's garden, gone to seed. Dried stalks of moonflower leaning against each other like old men, their heads bowed. She took her first breath of mountain air on the porch. Damp hemlock, wood smoke from a neighbor's chimney a half hollow away, the mineral cold of creek stone, and beneath all of it, faint and almost sweet, something she could never quite name, something like glass heated past its bearing point. She had not noticed it before, or she had noticed it and called it something else. You're home, Clara. You came back. She cleared her throat and went inside. The first 3 days were ordinary enough. She sorted her grandfather's jars of seeds, labeled in his crabbed handwriting, cress, bloodroot, widow snap, touch not the glass. She noted that last one and set it apart. She boxed up his books, his hand tools, his collection of bird skulls along the sill. She found a photograph she had never seen. Her grandfather as a young man, standing near a kiln, a long iron pipe at his lips, and cheeks puffed full. His eyes were not looking at the camera. They were looking at something past it, high and to the left. with an expression Clara would later describe as reverence, or possibly dread. The longer she looked, the less certain she became there was a difference. She slept well those first nights. The mountain breathed around the cabin, slow and enormous. The wind moved through the hemlock and the sourwood like a hand moving through long hair. She did not find the root cellar until the fourth day. The cellar door was in the floor of the back pantry, beneath a braided rag rug placed deliberately over the iron ring that served as its handle. She might never have found it, but she dropped a jar of preserved beans and knelt to pick up the pieces, and her fingers found the rug's edge, and the rug's edge found the ring. The door sighed when she pulled it up, a long exhalation, like something that had held its breath for years and simply given up. The smell from below was cool, dry, mineral, like the inside of a geode. She went down. The cellar was small, 6 feet by 8. Shelves along 2 walls, holding old canning jars and a rusted hand drill. A single chain-pull bulb that miraculously still worked, throwing the space in watery amber glow. And there, on the lowest shelf, in a row as deliberate as church pews, 23 glass spheres, each one the size of an apple. Hand-blown, she could tell by the subtle asymmetry of them, the faint ripples in their surface that caught the light the way old window glass does, making the world behind them just slightly wrong. Each one sealed with a ribbon of darker glass wound round its neck like a gasket. Each one in a small wooden cradle, carved with a name. She picked up the nearest one, and she heard it. A heartbeat. Slow, utterly calm, 60 beats per minute, perhaps fewer, coming from inside the glass, from the trapped breath clouded within. A small, pale fog coiled at the sphere's center, like a sleeping thing. Don't tap the glass. Don't you dare tap the glass. She set it down with great care. She stood in the amber light for a long time. All 23 spheres were breathing, the tiny fogs within each one expanding and contracting. If you held your ear near enough, the shelf would produce a sound like standing near a sleeping congregation. 23 small hearts, slow as winter water. She read the names on the cradles. Some she recognized from her grandfather's stories. Hazel, Orrin, little Dorothea, Old Burl, the McAfee twins, Grandmother Solly. The oldest name was carved in deeper, older letters, as if the wood had grown around it. Silas Voss, 1887. Her great-great-grandfather. She found her grandfather's sphere last. She knew it was his before she found the newest cradle because she recognized the rhythm, that heartbeat she had heard her whole childhood, his chest rising and falling beneath her ear on Sunday mornings when she had been small enough to climb into his lap without shame. Elias, the cradle read, and beneath that, in letters she had to tilt the bulb to see, and trusted to the ridge, as agreed, as agreed, as agreed, as agreed. Clara went back upstairs. She put on her coat and boots. She went to the back porch and looked up at the ridge, black and immense against the last bruised light. And she saw, just below the tree line, a faint glittering, as though the mountain had begun quietly to snow from the inside out. Silica rain, the old man at the feed store had called it once, without explanation. Don't follow it up. It ain't meant to be followed. Clara followed it up. The glass dust drifted down through the hemlock in slow, scintillating curtains, each mote catching the last light and throwing it back in cold, white sparks. The sound of it, faint, constant, was like the highest string on a fiddle played with a hair-breadth bow, a sustained crystalline keen that sat just at the edge of hearing, just at the border between music and pain. The ridge had a way of making you feel the path had always been there. The rocks arranged themselves beneath her boots. The laurel pulled its branches back. Something at the top of the mountain wanted her there. She smelled it before she saw it. A heat like melted quartz, like the breath from an oven in which something crystalline was curing. Then the trees gave way. The workshop sat on a shelf of granite that jutted from the ridge like a chin. No wood in its construction. Every wall, every surface was glass. Clouded, thick, hand-blown glass of a gray-green hue, the same as old sea glass. The structure curved rather than stood straight, its roof a dome from which an iron chimney rose. Light came from within, something paler and steadier than firelight, the color of a moon seen through thin cloud. She pressed her hand to the door, and it swung inward, as if it had been waiting for exactly the weight of her particular hand. The sound inside the workshop was a world. Glass hung from the ceiling on iron threads, hundreds of spheres, perhaps thousands, each one clouded with a small breath of fog, each one contributing its heartbeat to a collective rhythm. Not cacophony, a deep, layered resonance that Clara felt behind her eyes and in her back teeth. The spheres quinked against each other, gently, endlessly, a sound like rain on still water, like a chime in a windless room. In the center of the workshop, before a furnace that burned without wood or coal or any visible fuel, stood the glass-blower, taller than a person has need to be, its skin with the color and finish of porcelain, glaze white, the white fired until all impurity is driven out. Its hands and fingers were long, and the iron pipe it held was an extension of those fingers, natural as bone. Its face was a face the way a mask is a face. The brow, the nose, the closed eyes, the lips pursed around the pipe's end, but carved still, too still. It knows your name. It knew your name before your mother did. It did not startle at her entrance. It did not stop. It was in the act of blowing. Its chest expanded with a breath that seemed greater than any single body could hold, as if the ridge itself were breathing through it. From the end of the iron pipe, a globe of molten glass swelled, orange, then amber, then the pale green of old sea glass, turning in the slow rotation of its wrist. A heartbeat began inside it. Clara heard it start from nothing. A first knock, tentative, the way a new heart sounds before it knows its rhythm. Then steadier, then certain. The glass-blower sealed the sphere with a twist of darker glass and hung it on the chandelier above, that vast, trembling constellation of captured souls spread across the workshop ceiling like a night sky made of frozen breath. Then its sealed eyes found her. She could not explain how a thing without sight could locate a person in a room, but it did, the way a flower finds the sun through a wall. The valley holds. While the chandelier holds, the valley holds. Has held since 1887. Will hold while there is breath enough to fill the glass. Clara's mouth was dry as clean sand. "My grandfather," she said. The glass-blower inclined its head. He agreed to this. The head inclined again. Then those long porcelain fingers gestured upward, to the chandelier, to the thousands of clouded spheres clinking in their slow glass song. Clara looked up and found the newest sphere, still faintly warm, still orange at its heart where the amber was cooling. Her grandfather's heartbeat, slow, utterly calm, still there. She stood beneath the chandelier for a long time. The mountain breathed through the glass-blower. The glass-blower breathed into the glass. The glass held the valley in its quiet, trembling arms. She did not touch anything. She did not tap the glass. She went back down the ridge as the first stars came out, cold, indifferent to the small, warm heartbeats clustering in the workshop above the tree line, and yet still shining, still holding their positions in the dark. Now lean in close, friend. Let me tell you what came after. Clara did not sell the cabin. There are some inheritances you cannot pass to a stranger. She returned each October, cleared the garden, put it back to sleep. She checked the root cellar. The spheres were always undisturbed, always breathing on their cradles. She never went back up to the workshop. On still mornings she could hear, if she held her own breath, the faint crystalline singing drifting down through the hemlock, like the world's most private music. In the spring of the 20th year, she brought her daughter. The girl was 9. What matters is that she had her mother's steadiness and her great-great-great-grandfather's eyes. That particular gray, clear, unafraid. Clara told her everything on the porch the first evening, while fog came in off the ridge the way it always had, laying its shroud over the creek and the garden and the ironwork weather vane. She told her about the spheres, the glass-blower, the chandelier, the valley and what it rested on. The girl listened without interrupting. Then she said, "And when the chandelier breaks?" Clara held her coffee cup in both hands and looked at the ridge. "Your grandfather's jar of seeds," she said. "The one labeled, 'Touch not the glass.'" The girl waited. "I think," Clara said slowly, "it is instruction, not warning." The girl turned to look at her mother's profile in the lamplight, and Clara's face was the same as the young man's face in the old photograph, looking at something past the camera, something high and to the left, with an expression that sat precisely at the border between reverence and dread. The valley holds. It holds. That night the girl dreamed of glass, not breaking, holding. All that glass holding in the dark, breathing. 10,000 small hearts beating their slow rhythms in the clouded spheres of the chandelier. The whole luminous weight of the mountain's memory suspended on iron threads thin as spider silk, clinking softly, one against the next, one against the next. The sound of it like rain on water, like wind through a chime, like a promise kept for 140 years that intends to hold for 140 more. She would tell her own children in time, and they would tell theirs, and the ridge would stand, and the glass-blower would breathe, and the valley would hold. Now close your eyes, friend. You've walked the ridge tonight, and you've come back down, and there's nothing left to do but let the dark have you, gentle and full. the way fog fills a hollow, the way glass holds what it's given. The all-night horror playlist is waiting just ahead, slow and quiet and patient as old stone. Let it carry you the rest of the way.